There's a particular kind of ache that comes from watching a movie about a band that never quite made it, especially if you've lived some version of that story yourself. Alan Parker's 1991 film, The Commitments, has always occupied a strange and wonderful place in the pantheon of music movies. It's not a rags to riches fable. It's not a rockumentary, not even really a triumph. It's a comedy about failure, and somehow that's exactly why musicians love it so much. I first saw The Commitments when it hit home video, and I've been a big fan ever since. Watching it again recently, just a few weeks before Glen Hansard's death in a Dublin motorcycle accident, felt like something more than a rewatch. It felt like a reunion. Hansard, who played rhythm guitarist Outspan Foster, was 56 when he died, and while his post-Commitments career eclipsed the film in most people's minds, I'll admit I never quite connected those dots myself. I knew Hansard's music, I knew his Oscar, I just hadn't clocked that the wiry kid trading barbs with Jimmy Rabbit in a Dublin rehearsal room was the same guy. Watching the film again with that knowledge freshly in hand contextualized the whole thing, not as nostalgia, but as a document of somebody at the very beginning before any of us knew where he was headed. The setup is almost embarrassingly simple. Jimmy Rabbit, an unemployed North Dublin music obsessive with more ambition than tact, decides that what his working class neighborhood needs isn't rock, it's not pop, but soul.
The Irish are the blacks of Europe, and Dubliners are the blacks of Ireland. And the Northside Dubliners are the blacks of Dublin. So say it once, say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud.
He assembles a 10-piece band through classified ads and a word of mouth. A horn section, backup singers, a guitarist who thinks he's Bruce Springsteen, a drummer who's mostly there to disagree with people, a keyboardist old enough to have actually played with real soul legends, and fronting it all, a foul-mouthed, unpredictable, genuinely gifted singer named Deco Cuff, played by Andrew Strong, who was all of 16 years old when they filmed this movie, sounding like he gargles gravel and cigarettes for breakfast. What follows is basically a behind the music episode. The thrill of that first good rehearsal, the slow creep of ego, the resentments that build when talent isn't quite distributed evenly, the moment somebody starts sleeping with someone that they shouldn't, the gig that finally goes right, and the implosion that happens anyway. It's all so recognizable that it barely qualifies as drama. It's practically a documentary with better lighting. What separates The Commitments from other backstage band movies is that it actually stakes a claim about the music itself. Jimmy's pitch to the band that soul is the music of the oppressed, and the Irish working class understands oppression as well as anybody, sounds like a bit at first, but the film plays it straight, and by the time the band is tearing through Mustang Sally in a cramped rehearsal space, you believe it. The soundtrack, produced with real Dublin session musicians, doesn't sound like a movie prop. The band in this movie sounds like a band that could actually hold a room. And that distinction matters because it's the thing that makes every other beat of this film land. The infighting works because you believe there's something worth fighting over. The heartbreak of the ending works because you've heard what they were capable of. A lot of music movies fake the talent and hope the story carries it. The Commitments doesn't need to fake anything. This is where the film transcends being merely a good period piece and becomes something closer to a public service announcement for anyone who's ever tried to keep a band together for the sake of a Friday night door split. The specifics are exaggerated for comic effect, sure, but the emotional architecture is dead accurate. The talent gap is real. Every band has a Deco. Someone whose ability is undeniable and whose personality makes you want to fire them anyway. And a Joey the Lips Fagan, the older, possibly lying horn player who's played with everyone from Otis Redding to the Pope and whose stories nobody can verify, but nobody wants to be the one to challenge him. There's the guitarist convinced the band is beneath him. Outspan and Derek endlessly quoting Elvis and dreaming past the gig they're actually playing. There's the manager figure who genuinely loves the music and is also completely delusional about what it will get him. There's the drummer with a persecution complex, the backup singers who become the actual emotional center of every conflict, and the show that goes brilliantly, followed immediately by the fist fight that ends it all. If you've ever stood on a stage in front of 15 people who mostly came out for the drinking and the hooking up, if you watched your bandmates trade passive-aggressive glares over a missed cue and then had the whole thing catch fire for 4 unbelievable minutes anyway, you know exactly what this film is about. It's not really a movie about making it. It's a movie about the strange, addictive, doomed joy of being good for a night with people who will probably hate each other by Tuesday.
All you gotta do is try to live eternity. Oh, yeah.
It's worth pausing on Andrew Strong's performance because it's the load-bearing wall of the whole picture. He was a teenager doing a voice that sounds 40 years lived on, and the film leans on that dissonance without ever quite acknowledging it. Deco is meant to be a rude, gifted adult trapped in an obnoxious body, and Strong plays him with a swagger that has no business belonging to a 16-year-old. It shouldn't work. It works completely, and it's a big part of why the musical numbers hit as hard as they do. Coming back to the film with Hansard's death fresh in mind changes the texture of certain scenes without changing their content, which is, I think, the most honest kind of tribute a film can offer somebody. Outspan isn't the big character. He's the guy in the back, trading Elvis trivia, mildly annoying, mostly along for the ride. There's no foreshadowing of falling slowly in his few lines, no wink to the audience. That's precisely what makes it moving. You're not watching a star's origin story. You're watching a young musician who happened to be extraordinarily talented, doing unglamorous work in a low-budget Irish film years before anyone, including him probably, knew what was coming. Grief has a way of making you go back and look for the beginning of things, and The Commitments is now, unexpectedly, part of Hansard's beginning. For anyone revisiting this one, it's worth seeking out a good transfer. I watched the Shout Factory release via Kaleidescape, presented in its original 1.85:1 aspect ratio with a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 track. The 5.1 mix does real work here. This is a film built on live-sounding musical performances and having the horns and backing vocals given some room to breathe rather than being crushed into a stereo mix makes a noticeable difference in the concert and rehearsal scenes. The image holds up better than you might expect from a scrappy early 90s British production. Dublin's grey, unglamorous streets look appropriately lived in without looking degraded. The Commitments isn't a perfect film, and it doesn't pretend to be. Its politics are broad, its ending is abrupt, and it has no interest in tidy resolution, but it understood something about bands, real, small, working bands, that most movies never bother to get right. That the music can be genuinely great even when the people make it are falling apart, and that falling apart is very often the price of admission for ever sounding that good in the first place. 35 years on, and with one of its own now gone far too soon, it plays less like a comedy about a failed Dublin soul band, and more like a small, scrappy monument to every bar band that ever burned bright for one great night, and then quietly, inevitably, came apart.